Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video, I'm going to be talking to Moyen and Alliance Lowell about the decks that we brought to the Explorer.gg tournament this weekend. I think it's very valuable to kind of break down and analyze these decks so you guys know kind of the ideas that we had when approaching deck building and trying to find what are the best decks to kind of bring to a tournament format like this. So we had to bring two unique decks. They couldn't share any cards. The restrictions was you could bring one Series 5 card and two Series 4 cards across both decks. So yeah, let's jump straight into it. All right, so we are joined by Moyen and of course Lowell. These are the boys that I spent a lot of time with in Switzerland. We did a lot of prep for the Explorer.gg tournament. And we're going to talk through the two decks that we kind of collectively brought. And we were all thinking, oh, we were in kind of... I think this is like a really important kind of brainstorm session. Super rare opportunity, but really cool and really interesting to kind of share ideas and see like, okay, what do we think, the quote unquote meta decks will be, or what people will bring to this tournament? Because obviously the patch just came out like 2 days before this tournament, something like that. So everyone's kind of thinking of different things. We kind of knew going into this that some of the stronger decks were going to be, kind of like SANDMAN ramp. Like that was just kind of obvious. We figured PATRIOT would be pretty popular as well to kind of counter the SANDMAN ramp. So those are the kind of things we wanted to test mainly, right? So what's the idea is if it's like SANDMAN versus SANDMAN, right? What's the idea is if it's even PATRIOT versus PATRIOT? So this is the deck that we came up with, again, collectively as a group. We all had actually a lot of input into why certain cards are here. So I'll pass it over to Moyen to kind of talk about just the basics of this deck and why certain cards are included in here.
This deck is different to what was the popular SANDMAN ramp before, as it plays a very different early game. We don't play Sunspot, we don't play Lizard anymore, and we play Iceman Jeff instead. I think that's first of all, I think that's a general improvement of the deck because they're very impactful cards to hit the board early. But furthermore, they just help you win the mirror very easily because Iceman hitting ramp so often, or just even if it hits their 5-drop and they ramp and they can't play their 5 on turn 4, that just completely swings the game. And the other part is that we're playing Dino, which isn't anything crazy, but a lot of decks in this turn, or a lot of lineups in this tournament, needed Dino in their other deck. So even just having the Dino in this also made it even better for the mirror. The only downside to this deck is that we had to cut Odin in the end. And while Odin's not a bad cut, we, especially Lowell, felt that Odin was the worst 6-drop, and that really made sense to me. And we don't need all the 6-drops in the world. If we just have a little bit better early game, more impactful early game, we have the ramp more often, we deny our opponent's ramp. We have the most impactful 5-drop. That's more important than having another different 6-drop line for the late game.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think it's actually really important to have that early game, because a lot of games, even in our testing, were kind of determined obviously based on your early game. Obviously, if you draw into your ramp, but then even if you can establish, like a Moyen, a Jeff, or an Iceman, because Iceman can really disrupt your opponent. And if you don't get the ramp, like if the early game is good, you can maybe still have a shot to do it. Obviously, the ramp is the key thing here. Having that more early game also means that you're gonna have less games where you're gonna just have a handful of just 6s and 5s, right? Like you should be getting your early game more consistently. So overall, I think this is the deck out of the two that we brought that I was the most confident with, because I thought it was like really, really good against, like we said, against the mirror. It does extremely well. So yeah, overall, this deck was really, really good. In the matches that I played, it performed really well. I'm pretty sure, Moyen, you played a lot of ramp. Did you play primarily SANDMAN or PATRIOT in this tournament,
I think I primarily played SANDMAN, but to be fair, I think my PATRIOT was undefeated, and the losses that I did have came from this deck. But it was also partially down to my play. What's also interesting is, I think, about bringing this deck is that it covered like a lot of weird decks that you could have lineups where both decks lose to it, but with just having the SANDMAN deck in your lineup, you're never really worried about any Sarah deck, about any Moon Girl She-Hulk deck.
And those are things that I think we were a little bit less worried about, because one thing to note, guys, in this tournament, Hitmonkey was banned, so we weren't really expecting too many like Sarahs or kind of bounce decks or anything like that. But even if they were, the SANDMAN would still be good. Like we would still probably bring the SANDMAN even if that was the case. Sorry, Lowell, did you want to say something?
Yeah, my apologies for sound quality again. I just wanted to get back to the Odin for like half a second, right? Because I believe a lot of people will be wondering about it. But the main reason is, like, in our playtest, it felt like the card we wanted to play least when we had it. And of course, it has a lot of advantages. Like, it's one of the 6 costs that allows you to play a lot around Chen-Chi and so on. But also, like, our deck is not running Jubilee, right? And Odin takes a lot more power in the ramp list with that card. So yeah, just giving a bit more context to people as to why it just felt weak in our specific lineup.
100%, yeah. I definitely agree. I definitely agree. All right, so that's the Sandman ramp list. We're gonna move on to the Patriot list. All right, yeah. So here's the Patriot list. You know, surprise, surprise. What's the big innovation with Patriot? We just add Super Skrull. But it's kind of funny, the story. I do want to get into the story a little bit of why we kind of considered Super Skrull. So we did feel that we thought there would be a lot of kind of ongoing as well coming to this tournament. So some sort of like Thanos ongoing, or you know, even if people want to bring negative or whatever, like it's always a strong kind of lineup to bring. So we did want to bring Patriot from the start to, again, counter the Sandmans. It's kind of the thing of like, you know, bring the good deck, bring the counter to the good deck. That's like a solid place to start. And one thing as well about this particular Patriot list, I'm sure we'll get into it, it's important that we include Cosmo in here as well for multiple reasons. That's to protect our Patriot from stuff like Enchantress, from Rogue. As well, Moyen is the absolute god for, you know, Cosmo sniping. So it was a lot of fun to kind of learn from him and try and pick up some of his skills regarding that. But yeah, the biggest thing was we included Super Skrull. And this is a list that's going around everywhere at the moment. It's been winning some other tournaments as well. But yeah, the whole idea of the Super Skrull was that it counteracts any other like Thanos ongoing decks. But then also within the mirror, if they don't have Super Skrull and you draw Super Skrull, it's basically game over. You know what I mean? But yeah, Moyen, if you want to kind of explain your thoughts further on this deck.
Sure, because it makes sense to talk about the context of why we brought Super Skrull, because I wouldn't necessarily play it on ladder. But for this tournament, first of all, why did we bring Patriot? We wanted 2 decks that beat up on Sandman. So, because we expected it to be popular in the tournament, and with us having these 2 decks, our opponent can basically never queue Sandman, so they have to queue the other deck, and then we can just pick whichever of our 2 decks is better against the other deck. And then at the same time, we would have some weaknesses though. So Patriot, we would only have the mirror if we face Patriot, and it can also beat our Sandman ramp deck. So we wanted a tech for the Patriot mirror. And the other thing, as you talked about, was like the Thanos ongoing, which we didn't expect a lot, but at least I thought that it's a very strong deck. And even if little people play it, it's quite likely we're facing it if we're making it to top cut, which was the goal. So we also needed something against that, as Sandman ramp also loses to Thanos ongoing. So it just covered a lot of weaknesses. And it's actually similar to why we brought Cosmo. And because we brought Cosmo, the Shocker was also a no-brainer, because it's with Cosmo, it's more important to have initiative on 3. So then the rest of the deck, I think, kind of builds itself, or I wouldn't even consider changing of any of the other cards. And just having Cosmo in there meant we're also fine if, let's say, we face a Hela deck and we're scared to queue Sandman into that, we can just lay this with Cosmo. Or if we're facing a Wong deck, we also cover that. And we wanted Patriot naturally beats Sandman ramp, right? But the problem is now against Sandman ramp we have the dead card of Super Skrull, so it does actually get a bit closer. But at least the Cosmo helps a little bit against the Sandman ramp, because you can sometimes just snipe the turn 3 Electro or the turn 3 Wave.
Yep, 100%. And I think that is important to point out, is that yes, against the Sandman list, Super Skrull is kind of a dead card. But again, this is something we kind of tested. Like we said, okay, if we put Super Skrull in here, how bad is it, right? So we did our testing. So originally, just so you guys know, Super Skrull was Kazara. If you're looking for, oh, I don't have Super Skrull, what's a replacement? Just put Kazara in. That's probably the safest thing to do. I mean, you could consider Thing as well, but we have A-Bomb to kind of go tall as well. So I think Kazara is probably just the better replacement to put in there. But yeah, I think it worked out really well. We still consistently beat Sandman with this list. It's not like a completely dead card. But yeah, that's essentially it. Those were the decks that we brought. They performed extremely well. Moyen came second, so close to the victory. So yeah, I think we're gonna go through 1 or 2 games now, just to kind of showcase the deck and see how you play it.
The game starts here, and we do see an Iceman opening on the Fishu side. Moyen this time going for the Patriot deck with the Super Skrull deck.
The Super Skrull versus Onslaught with Claw, with Dino. This is one saucy 5 energy Super Skrull, because Iceman's just hit it.
And Fishu might rinse and repeat here, just play Iceman multiple times over and over. This is a popular strategy when cloning Vats as a location, because it breaks your opponent's combos apart super heavily.
The Soulstone also going down into cloning Vats is a really good option. Of course, you're drawing a card with the Soulstone, but also it can play for 5 points. Although, that is another card that the Super Skrull can copy, of course. Now, Fishu's like best approach might be to consider like, okay, well, I need to pick my moment. I just need to pray that Moyen has missed Super Skrull in this specific game.
And at some point. You know what's really nasty here is that Moyen can play Super Skrull twice as well. Might go into cloning Vats once, might go into nowhere once, but the Iceman is going to matter here. That makes it much more of a commitment on Moyen's side.
So for those that aren't familiar with Super Skrull, because it is a lesser spotted card, it was a Series 5 card. I believe it's now Series 3 very recently.
Yes.
So it is a 4 energy card at 2 stats, and it is copying the ongoing abilities of every card your opponent plays. So it can be an Iron Man, a Devil Dinosaur, an Onslaught, all on one single card.
And especially in matchups like these, that can be a blowout. That can almost win matches on its own. This is an interesting line of play Fishu decides to take. Wants to shut down the cloning vats now. Fishu is basically saying, okay, I have had enough gains from this cloning vats. I don't want my opponent to copy a Patriot on this turn. Before that happens, I turn cloning vats into something entirely new.
Both, well, one player's locked their play, and it looks like Fishu's locked his play in, but we're seeing the big rope from Moyen really thinking through his plays. The Reality Stone comes through. Bar with no name!
It's Bar with no name!
I've been calling it all day. I've been waiting for the Reality Stone into Bar with no name, and it's finally happened.
But this is so weird, even if you're in Moyen's shoes now, because now that kind of locks you out of Patriot. Right? As soon as you play Patriot, you win the Bar with no name. But is the Super Skrull on his own enough to just win a second location? The answer might very well be yes.
Yep. It's already going to be 2 Soul Stones. Professor X could be the way for Fishu to maybe just shut down a location. It's a really exciting one here. Yeah, and as you mentioned, Patriot no longer an option because that is going to buff the Wasp and the Misty Knight both by 2 points, which would put Moyen at 5 and therefore losing Bar of No Name. Very obvious. Bar of No Name gets kind of weird. Lots of people. Have you ever Green Goblin the Bar of No Name thinking you would win, or is that just me?
I don't think I've ever been in this situation before, but I can totally get the sentiment.
I think there's quite a lot. Guys, in the chat, press 1 if you have Green Goblin or Hobgoblin the Bar of No Name, thinking you'd win and then realizing you lose.
And if you have never done it, press F for specimen.
Yeah. We see the snap. Moyen with the IRL snap. What a guy. This is what we love to see.
And Fishu does take the retreat this time around. Not an explosive start the same way that their previous meeting went. But in this case, Moyen comes out ahead with the early psychological advantage, and we do hop straight into round 2.
Yeah, we saw Fishu writing down some notes, taking his time in previous matchups. At this one, at the end of the game, he's ready to go again.
Onslaught Citadel with 2 ongoing decks, and Super Skrull has to be happy about that just coming off the top of the deck of Moyen.
Do you think that you could snap if you're Moyen on turn 1 here? Like with the Super Scroll draw?
The interesting thing is, you could, but why would you? You're not playing a card. You can get more information for free, wait to see the other locations first. This would be a value snap, right? You don't want to scare your opponent off. You rather want to tell them, I don't have a card I can play here, and keep them in the game for longer.
So what you're saying with the value snap, like, or rather, if you were to snap turn 1, it would be incorrect because you may as well just wait until turn 2, see what the middle location is, for example.
Exactly, because you're not showing your strength until turn 2 the earliest. Or with other decks, it could even be turn 3. So you can get the free information, how good is my opponent's hand, and do the location screw me over or not. In this case, it's not happening for Moyen. Shocker comes out on the right side. And Fishu is surely not going to move that Mind Stone around, but Moyen can reach Sanctum Sanctorum quite effectively if he should find the Thanos, the Ultron eventually.
Not a typical line here from Fishu to play the Lockjaw into a very full location, but he's going to probably want to avoid playing all these big cards into the Citadel and then getting shuffled with Lockjaw. Like, one interesting thing with the change to Lockjaw, previously, if you wanted to put big stats into the Lockjaw lane, it would be very difficult. You would have to high roll. But now, you can play a Reality Stone into the Lockjaw, which swaps, and then something like a Dino actually stays and sticks. So, in some ways, like, this Thanos deck in some niche situations actually got better. Obviously, overall, it got a lot worse, but that's something to look out for.
This is a very interesting game indeed. An unconventional line of play here with the Lockjaw Time Stone, but it does ramp Fishu into 5 energy next turn. So Fishu could go 5-drop into 5-drop. We see Moyen with a snap that almost looked a bit, I don't know, frustrated.
He needs a little bit of work on his sassy snap.
Exactly. The facial expression does not match the alpha play that he is putting out. Feels a bit tenured, a bit laborious.
Yeah.
But I think this is gonna... I'll let him know. He's gonna have to work on this.
The Super Scroll is down in Onslaught Citadel. There is a whole bunch of ongoing cards available for Fishu, which are no longer going to be options. Now, it could be a potential for like Moyen to try and hold this Super Scroll in until turn 6 for like that surprise value. But with cards like Ultron, He might be wanting to play those to get the points into Sanctimorium. And there also could be some like niche situations where like if he holds the Super Scroll until turn 6, plays it on turn 6, Fishu could just decide to play no ongoing cards at all and take a change of plan. Play something like the Chavez.
This is an interesting spot for Fishu for picking up the Reality Stone and can therefore kind of contest the Super Skrull's true power. Because Super Skrull of course benefits the most from Onslaught Citadel. Does drop the Devil Dinosaur into the waiting hands of Super Skrull.
So many points are about to enter Onslaught Citadel, but one thing the Dino does is it's a lot better for Vishu because he has those extra cards in hand. The Mystique
copying the Super Skrull. Never mind what I just said, what Spessy just said. Now having full control over the Onslaught Citadel, and I don't think there's a way out here for Fishu.
Are you dizzy? This is the dirtiest play I've ever seen. What I want to see Fishu here do is slam the Iron Man into Devil Dinosaur and then just retreat on turn 6 because he's losing, surely.
Just for the memes, just for the 1 gazillion billion
just to
power.
See the biggest Super Scroll of all time.
Does
see the armor and the Reality Stone. Reality Stone obviously pulling away Citadel, and like this is actually, it makes a lot of sense, right? You could hit something like Bar with no name and turn the tides on this matchup potentially.
It is a bit of a desperation play. It is a Hail Mary long shot, but this is all that Fishu has left in this very current situation. The only question I will throw at you, Specimen, is do you think Fishu should have stayed here? Was it a good spot? Or should he have left to Moyen Snap, knowing that Onslaught Citadel is a very tricky location to handle?
That's a big question as we see the Abomination come down, the Wasp. It's a really tricky one. I honestly don't know. I think like the Sanctimorium is pretty bad, but like Fishu like has to make a stand at some point, right?
That is actually a good point. I'm a bit surprised to see the Wasp come out because it makes both Super Skrulls smaller. And he has Ultron in hand anyway and locked himself out of the location. I'm not quite sure what the reasoning behind this was. Would be interesting to know.
Yeah, it's a really good point. The Big House is the final location. The Reality Stone, therefore locking Fishu out of being able to play a card. Well, he can play his 1-point Time Stone. It is going to draw him a card as well, so his Devil Dinosaur will stay at the current power.
The Big House is actually more devastating for Fishu than for Moyen right now, because Fishu cannot play his Claw to the left anymore to support Sanctum Sanctorum, and he has to be worried of Moyen potentially holding the Ultron.
Yeah, it's a really good point. This seems like it could have actually been a pretty decent spot for Fishu if it wasn't for the Big House. Like, he maybe would have had a chance.
The Reality Stone.
The decision to stay in, he found a moment where he could potentially win. He needs to be bold. He can't retreat every game, right? And I think it seems like it was actually a really good decision from Fishu to stay in. There was maybe a chance he had that on another day. Which is obscene because it looked like it was over. I was calling him to just play the Iron Man for the content. The turn 1 snap comes through. And oh my goodness, I didn't see Fishu do anything, but I did see Moyen have a little like, really? You're gonna snap me right now, mate?
Ah, interesting. Wait, did the snap come from Fishu?
Yeah, it must have done with Moyo's reaction.
And Moyen has to be happy about this. Early curve, Patriot in hand, and you are very likely to draw into some other power cards later on, whether it will be Mystique, whether it will be Super Skrull, or just the good old Ultron should be enough to take control here.
I actually love this snap from Fishu, you know, because like, he can't just accept that he's in a bad matchup and just let Moyen just lead him down, right? He needs to be aggressive at some point. He likes his hand, and he just maybe says, well, hopefully this is a game where Moyen misses his Super Scroll. Maybe he retreats and gives me a 1 cube. So I love it from Fishu. It's bold, it's brave.
Yep. And this is something that he has to do here, take the calculated risks, but this is about the best situation he can have. This is about as good of an opening hand as he can get. And he can't wish for more. The matchup is going to be doomed no matter what. So gotta take chances.
It's bad news for Fishu, though, with the draw for Moyen. The Super Scroll has entered the building, ladies and gentlemen.
And also Daily Bugle has been popping up a lot today, and gives important information. Copying key cards on both sides. Moyen now knows Fishu is holding an Onslaught.
And also, this opens up the Super Scroll onto Onslaught line as well.
Ooh, that is a very good point that I have not yet considered. But the Super Skrull copying a Patriot would actually be completely cracked.
Yep.
Is Fishu going to play a Patriot though? No real upside to it.
We're seeing the Lockjaw is down into Camp Lehigh here. the armor in Bugle, and the Sacred Timeline on the right, not usually a very impactful location in my experience. Of course, there's other locations like the Raft, where if you fill them, it's a huge advantage. But the Sacred Timeline, not really one that, it's very rare that it's actually relevant. Could be some points on Dinosaur later on.
What's interesting about Fishu's hand here is that Camp Lehigh actually really smoothed out his mana curve. He can now basically play a 1-drop into Lockjaw every turn and still support the same turn with playing a card like Hulkbuster, with maybe playing a card like Patriot. Does opt to go for another line of play and play all of the 1-drops. Reality Stone trying to get rid of the Sacred Timeline. Bit surprising to me, but I think Fishu just really values drawing here, cycling through his deck and trying to find some other key cards for this matchup.
Yeah, the Iceman, the decision to put into the Lockjaw, of course, with the change to the Lockjaw, if you're not aware, you can only cycle 1 card a turn with Lockjaw. Previously, this would have been a play where we would see the Soul Stone, the Reality Stone, maybe even going down into the Lockjaw location. And Iceman is the choice because it's a very high impact card, potentially if it comes back later off of your Lockjaw, compared to maybe like a Soul Stone could have also been good, but you'd rather have the Soul Stone on the board, whereas the Iceman has the value on the on-reveal ability rather than its presence on the board.
Do see Wasp coming out, followed up by the Super Skrull. Fishu's nemesis
The
in this
big
matchup
man.
so far.
Yeah, and at least for Fishu, like, he knows it's the— oh!
Popping
my
out the Iron Man,
goodness!
but it does benefit Moyen much more. The Iron Man has betrayed Fishu.
This Super Skrull is absolutely obscene. The main criticism I have really of Moyen is the fact that he's got the Super Skrull and he doesn't have, like, he's got the common border. He has no cool variant, because there's some saucy Super Skrull variants. I'm going to ask Moyen to check his shop, and I will personally pay for him if he has a Super Skrull variant in his shop and he makes it further into the final.
That is a great point you're making. Apparently the story behind the Super Skrull tech was that they were originally not even considering it, not wanting to go for it in the first place, trying out some other tech choices. And I think on this morning, or late last night when everyone went to bed, someone had the Super Skrull idea, texted and called everyone else, they tried it out, and it worked out well. So it was probably just unlocked or just purchased. Doesn't really have boosters on the card yet. And that's why it's OG Super Skrull looking like it was randomly generated, but was put into this deck with a lot of purpose in mind.
Yeah, Moyen actually ended up spending like 12,000 tokens on cards the day before the decks were submitted. He got like Dark Court because he wanted to test it. He tested out some other cards as well. So he's needing some credits, this boy.
He got
some tokens, rather.
Yeah, he got everyone's sweetheart as well. Jeff was part of that 12,000 token purchase, and Moyen goes for the snap back. It was a little bit more sauce.
It's improving.
Yeah.
It is improving.
Moyen's attitude is improving. We love to see it here.
And we're locked in. Ladies and gentlemen,
Ooh,
Fishu
Fishu
has decided to make his stand, and it is brave. In a normal matchup, you would fold here. But Fishu needs this big, high cube victory.
And the debris is enormous here. I think Fishu was wanting to go for the middle and the right side, and the rock just taking Fishu's playmaking ability on the right side away. Now Moyen, well, it's also hard for him to grow significantly larger on the right side though. He doesn't have very high power cards, but as soon as Fishu plays a card from hand, Dino goes down to 70.
Yeah, exactly.
Ultron right side seems super safe.
Yep, the Dino is, if a card is played, going to be losing points. Now, interestingly, Fishu's line could be something
Wait.
like play a Time Stone, which draws him a card.
Yes,
He has the Soul Stone,
but
which would— oh, but the Patriot's on the board.
yeah, Ultron is gonna lose Murder World by 1, but Daily Bugle will be 1 because the drone will be Patriot buffed. This is incredibly close, but I don't see a way out for Fishu here. Well, unless Moyen does not go for Ultron and...
Yep. This is a 7-cube game. If both players lock in their plays, this is exactly where Fishu wants to be in many ways. A high-stakes game before it's too late. He has to go for it. He's made his stand. The decision has been made.
But
For Moyen, he still has the option to retreat.
this looks like Onslaught is coming down into the middle instead. It is such a tough decision to make.
Both players still unsure.
Time is running out!
Right down to the rope. You
Time
see,
Stone Hulkbuster.
the Hulkbuster is going to mean that the Devil Dinosaur is less points to the right. What do we see? It's
Ultron
the Ultron.
is coming down and it will take down the Devil Dinosaur. And I think this is it. Fischer should be at 17 on the right side, just barely losing by 1 point. And this was a 7-cube game. GG's. Moyen gets his revenge.
Man, I have to say, what a performance from Fischer, though. He lost it, but what an unbelievable performance. Getting that high-stakes game in such a bad matchup to lose by a single point on the right. He found his moment, he picked it, and on another day, it could have gone his way.